This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome all our Torah Anytime viewers coming back after a long spiritual vacation. Which, by the way, you should know that after holidays, people usually feel they have to get back into spirituality. It shouldn't be that way. You should be more psyched about spirituality in the holiday. That's the whole point of the holidays. So you just got out of the holiday of Pesach, you should be feeling psyched to do more. You know how it gets, you come out of a long vacation, you have to go back to work? And so now you're working and now you have to get back in the motion. That is understandable. But if you're coming from a spiritual high, you shouldn't have to get back to the spiritual high. Now, I don't know what everybody's current status, via spirituality is at this point, but that's how you know you had a successful holiday. When you're coming out of the holiday on a spiritual high as opposed to on a spiritual low. Okay, so now let us begin. Tonight we're learning for Lefuah Shlema to Yecheskel ben Tzila. So we are continuing our Foundation of Faith series. It's actually been a while. We actually didn't do this since before Purim. It's actually quite some time. And I've actually had quite a few people reach out to me and be like, are you going to finish this series? I don't know if I have the reputation out there not to finish series, Mashiach series, I don't know. But we are going to go and finish this series. So being that it's been a long time, let's do a quick recap on, we're up to principle number 10 tonight, so let's do a quick recap of the first 9, then we'll begin to on principle number 10. By the way, this one is so important because this one has any psychologists or studying to be psychologists in this room over here? Every Jewish woman? Okay, no. Generally speaking, if you go, if you ask a Jewish crowd if there's any type of profession, if it's a woman crowd, there's got to be at least one therapist in the room. Is there any therapists here? No, or studying to be one, that's fine. Studying, okay. No one's raising their hand. Okay, don't be shy. Okay, 3, 4, maybe, I don't know. I'm confused in life. Yeah, undecided.
Speech therapy is a whole.
It's also therapy. And then accountant. But I don't know so much about the woman. And also psychology, because yeah, that's true also. But this is from my studies that I just made up. This is what I've seen. Okay, so anyways, going on to let's review quickly the 10 principles, the first 9 principles, and then we'll go to the 10th one. And the 10th one, you'll see why I say psychology comes into play over here. So the first of the 10th principle is that God exists. That is a very simple and obvious one. God exists. But what does it mean that God exists? God does not only exist as a creator, he also exists as one that oversees everything. So he exists and creates, not like we would ordinarily create something. Human beings that create something take current things that are around and put it together, and they call it an innovation, a creation, something new that's coming into play. God creates something called yesh me'ayin. Yesh me'ayin means he creates something out of nothing that only exists from a godly perspective, not from a human perspective. So that is foundation of faith number 1. Number 2 is that God is only one. What does it mean that God is only one? So every pain, every pleasure, every sadness, every happiness that you have had or will have in your life all stems from one source, and that source is God. That's not going to stand like that unless you want to hold it the whole time. That's going to stem from only one source, and that is God. If you want, I can hold it like this the whole time. Okay. Excellent. Do I have to move? Okay. So, sorry. Talking about losing my train of thought. No, it's not your fault. It's my fault that I can't focus. So, okay. So number 2 is that God is one. The source of everything that we have in our life all stems from God. Everyone put your wallets, your credit cards, let's pile it up over here. Face up, please, so we could, okay. So now that's number 2. Anybody with me here yet? Did I lose? I think I lost everybody. The phone is a lot more interesting than everything that I'm saying. Oh, we're with, okay, fine. Okay. So, number 1, God exists. Number 2, God is one. Number 3, God is not physical. God is incorporeal. God doesn't have a goof, doesn't have a body. Now, we said when we mentioned this is that not only that God is not physical, God is also not spiritual. Spirituality is a creation in itself. God is above and beyond even spiritual and surely physical. Number 4 is that God precedes everything. He was here before everything existed, and he'll be here after everything will exist. Number 5 is that there's only one being that is appropriate to pray, and that is to God. We also did mention, this was a very important class on prayer, we should also bring to point that one of the things that we mentioned over here, that in order to have the highest level of prayer is that you self-nullify yourself, meaning that you know that you're nothing and that everything comes from God. So you're relying 100% on God, and you're nothing. That type of prayer is the highest level of prayer that you can pray. And that's why idolatry is all the opposite. Idolatry is not all about God. It's not all about like self-nullification, but rather it's all about me. So obviously this is the flip side. If you want to look more into this, review that class that we spoke about on the prayer. I think it was on principle number 5. I don't remember what class it was, maybe 3 or 4 on this series. The 6th principle is Shekol Divrei Neviim Emet. All the words of the prophets, the righteous prophets, the true prophets, they are true. Why is this so important? Why did this have to come into the foundation of faith? By the way, this series is so important that people that, let's say, want to go and convert to Judaism, they need to know this stuff. The sad thing is that people that are Jewish from birth don't know this stuff. And, the question that they ask converts, I've asked people that were, religious from birth, and they don't know it. Can you name the 10 Commandments? Don't shake your heads either way. But, the foundation of faith, the 10 Commandments, the 6 constant mitzvot, there's some things that are foundation of Judaism. Yet, for some reason, people just want to learn Kabbalah. I don't know, just teach me Kabbalah. If you cannot memorize the 10 Commandments, even not in order, I'll give it not in order, even any order that you would want, then you would... where are you? And I remember I actually once spoke to somebody who didn't keep Shabbat, and I was telling him, do you keep the Torah? He's like, the written yes, the oral no. I'm like, impossible. It doesn't work. You can't. It doesn't work that way. But I'm not like, you know what? I'm not even going to delve into this. Do you keep the 10 Commandments? 10 Commandments? For sure I keep. And then I said, do you know the 10 Commandments? And he was like, he started, I'm like, you know what? Don't even name it off to me. Do you keep Shabbat? And I knew that he didn't, because it was on Shabbat and his phone was vibrating. So I said, do you keep Shabbat? And he's like, I don't, but... I'm like, but what? But Shabbat is not on the 10 Commandments? It's actually there. It's actually in the first 5 section, So people go so far ahead, but they don't even know the basics of the basics. Now, even though this is quite the basics of the basics, we are going in a deeper breadth that even people that were religious from birth don't necessarily know all these ideas. But the 6th principle is that all the words of the prophets are true. Why is this so important? Because the Torah is all based off communication between God and mankind. And that is another fancy way of saying prophecy. So the way that we have the Torah is because the prophecy had to exist. So if someone says a prophecy never existed, that means that there's no way of God communicating with man, and hence there's no way of knowing what is right, what is wrong, what is the Torah really meant to do. Is the Torah made up? Is it man-made? Is it something that came over time? But the first foundation is that there is a thing of prophecy. We also mentioned that who is a prophet? It was somebody that is very, 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 very righteous. I don't know if you remember that, because not everybody could be a prophet. For all those people that are reaching out to me and all the other rabbis, that they're the Messiah and they're anybody else, or they have prophecy and God told them something. Just an FYI. If you have those 10 veries, then I will listen. Okay, seventh principle of faith is that not only whatever the prophet said is true, but also the prophet of Moshe Rabbeinu, he is the father of all the prophets. He prophesies differently and above and beyond what anybody else ever prophesies in 4 different manners. We said number 1, he was awake when he prophesied. Number 2, it wasn't through a metaphor. Number 3, his strength didn't fail him, unlike other prophets where the strength failed him. And number 4 is that he received prophecy whenever he wanted. Number 8. That was number 7. Number 8. Number 8 is that all the Torah that we have today is the same Torah that we got by Moshe Rabbeinu, meaning that we put on the tefillin the same way, that we shake the lulav the same way, that we eat the matzah. Everything is the same exact way that we had from the beginning, and there was no change to it. This is the same Torah that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, the Rambam brings down, there are 3 individuals who classify as people that deny the Torah. Now, what is it? It's 3 categories, not 3 individuals, 3 categories of people that deny the Torah. Number 1, if somebody who says that there's one word or one letter that was not from Moshe, that was not from God, Moshe Rabbeinu made it up, or somebody else made it up, that person already, somebody is in the classification that he denies the Torah. That person has no share in the world to come. Number 2, is if someone says that there's no such thing as an interpretation, denies the oral law. Let's simplify it. Somebody who denies the oral law also has no share in the world to come. That's under the classification of someone who denies the Torah. And thirdly, someone who denies the Torah and says that it was nullified. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this thing, but half the world, goes with this. That the Torah was nullified, a new Torah was given afterwards, and that is the Torah that these are people that deny the Torah, and these are people that have no share in the world to come. Okay, so that was number 8. Number 9, the last one that we're reviewing, is that the Torah will never be changed. This also comes into play, Christianity or Islam. The Torah that will always stay exactly the same. This is if a prophet comes and says, hey, I want to change, that God came over to me and told me that this is going to be changed. This law is no longer valid. It's void, null and nullified. It's a new law that's coming. The second that some prophet comes and says that something in the Torah is nullified, you know that prophet is a false prophet. This was also actually a very important class. We also mentioned that, what's the whole idea of nullifying the Torah? Somebody who nullifies the Torah, somebody who says there's a new law or this law is no longer valid, is showing that the Torah is not the blueprint of creation. If the Torah is a blueprint of creation, that means it stays for all eternity. And you cannot change it. And this is what we spoke about. If, let's say, you were to be given a 3-month, break of the Torah, would you take it? Would you say, okay, listen, you can do whatever you want for 3 months and you're not going to get punished? So if you go and you say, yes, I want to do that, that's great, I could taste all life's pleasures, that means that you see the Torah as something, an obligation, and not something as a privilege. But if you say, no, I love the Torah, what are you talking about? This, and by the way, this is a level that's needed to be reached. It's not so simple to reach that. But when you get to the point that, no, I love the Torah, this is amazing, this is what I need, then you realize you come to the point of understanding that the Torah is a privilege and not an obligation. And that's really what it is. The Torah is beautiful. The Torah does not need to be changed. The Torah is perfect just the way that it is. Okay, so that is a quick 11-minute and 38-second recap. And now we will begin with the new topic at hand, which is principle number 10. So principle number 10 is Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema. I believe with perfect faith. God knows every single person's action and every single person's thoughts. And we're going to actually really go on a lot about the thoughts. So this is based off a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 33, verse 15. It says, yachad libam. He, God, who forms all the hearts together, hamevin el kol ma'asehem, and understands all their deeds. By the way, somebody who says that God doesn't know the actions of mankind, there are certain people that go and say that God created the world. I'll give that to you, but God left it to run through the laws of nature. God is no longer, involved in the world. Somebody like this that says that's an apikolat. This principle that God knows your actions and knows your thought. By the way, we're going to break this down, but you know how crazy knows your thoughts? That's what you're thinking. All your psycho thoughts that goes on in your mind, it's all being marked up in there. That's like something like, will make you more uncomfortable soon. But this is something that it's hard to to comprehend. But what does this come into play? This comes into play that say that the people that say that God does not oversee everything. The Torah says that not only that God oversees everything, God actually oversees your thoughts. Your thoughts are actually being marked down. Your actions certainly get marked down, but also your thoughts. There is a midrash rabbah in Bereshit, in Genesis, chapter 68, that there was a Roman noblewoman who went to Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta, and she said, what does God do all day? I mean, I understand the first 6 days was very busy, right, in the creation of the world. He had to create the world. 7th day he rested. What did he do on the 8th day? Like 8th to today. Like, what is he doing all this time? So Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta answered, God is mizaveg zivugim. God is making matches. So she says, really? That's what God does all day? He makes matches? So she says, I could do that myself. She was a very wealthy woman. She had many, many servants, maidservants and manservants. So the next day, she calls all her maidservants in. She lined 1,000 women on one side. Tell her the level of power and money that she had. 1,000 men on the other side, and she played the matching game. Says, you marry you, and you marry you, and you marry you, and you marry you, and they married off all 1,000 in one night. She goes and she says, listen, I could do this in my sleep. This is what God is bothered by all day? She couldn't understand it. The next morning, there was a whole line out her door. All her servants One had a black and blue eye. Another one had a broken leg. Another one's still closing his ears, going la 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 la. Everybody has another complaint, and she goes, "What's going on?" He says, "Listen, whatever you do, I don't care. You kill me, I can't stay married to her." And she said, "Listen, you're going to kill me, or he's going to kill me, because I can't stay married to him." Every single person says, "This is not for me." After she went through all her 1,000 and all, they said, we can't, this is not a match for us. She realized what God does. That, God is making matches all day. Now, if we could say Chidush, this is not only matching between husband and wife. Every single person that you meet is a match also. You ever think about it? Have you ever sat next to an airplane and had a conversation with somebody? Or a person had a conversation with you, and you wanted to just sleep, and you couldn't sleep because the person wanted to tell you all about their grandkids, which for some reason are dogs because they don't have any family, and they're going and they're showing you all the pictures, and they're going on and on about this. God is making these matches as well. It's not the El Al lady who says, "Oh yeah, you, what are you, 120 pounds? We could put you next to a 500-pound man. Yeah, that's going to be good." Balance the plane out. That's what we're all about. Everything that happens is directed and orchestrated by God. You go to a class, you meet people over here. That's also orchestrated. God is making matches every single day. If you think about it, I would say over 50% of people that have the jobs that they have today is because of the people they just so randomly, there's no such thing as random, so I'm using air quotes, met. There's nothing that's random. God is orchestrating everything. So what is God doing all day? He's making matches. That's what he's making matches all day. Now let's say God misses. God can't. God won't. It's impossible. But let's say God misses one action. What does that come into play? If you guys are familiar with the butterfly effect, I think we spoke about something like this. God, let's say God would miss one action. So let's say some guy is playing baseball out in the park. And he's playing baseball and he messes up, like men generally do. That's why one of the things that the Khatan teachers tell the men, right when you wake up, what do you say? I'm sorry, exactly. For what? Just apply it wherever you need to apply it. Just use that. Put it in your pocket for later if I don't do anything yet. It's just, I'm sorry. So this guy he was playing baseball. He messed up and he was an angry fellow. He was a guy who had a very, very big temper. And he was so angry that he took the bat that he was hitting with and he just threw it. And the bat, was in the park, did slow motion spin. Everybody saw it. There was a woman that was walking with her little child over there. And everybody was like, "No!" And the woman's like, "What?" And then she sees the bat going, and she's like, "What am I supposed to do right now?" And then, she gets hit in the head, falls down on the floor. The little kid is screaming. Everybody is screaming. Everybody is running over. There's a pool of blood that's pooling under her. The kid is crying. The angry guy is crying. The pitcher is crying for some reason. Everybody is just crying and screaming. They call 911. Hatzalah comes because they're always faster. They come in. They put the woman on the stretcher. They bring her to the hospital. But unfortunately, by the time that she got to the hospital, she passed away. Now, let's say, what did God miss? The fact that the guy threw the bat. That's the only action that God missed. God was looking at something. And that happened. Now, what would happen is a butterfly effect. Let's take you on a little journey, shall we? So, this kid is going over there. The kid was sitting in the mother's blood. And the kid was screaming and crying. After a few years, what happens? It's a very traumatic, got PTSD. The kid fell into depression, had anxiety. And unfortunately, within a short period of time, the kid took his life. He couldn't live with it. Meanwhile, the angry guy, the guy that threw the bat, he was so, there's such a depression. He's like, I killed somebody. He physically, with his, bare hands, he killed somebody. So he went into depression. He ended up losing his job. His wife left him, and now his children don't have a father. Now, he had one of his children, was an angry fellow, just like his dad, who goes in his father's footsteps, and no father, no parnasa. The kid unfortunately end up in the streets. He gets in the street because of his character trait, and he ends up in a gang. And he becomes a hitman for this gang. He, how do we say this? He took care of 8 people before he got caught and by the police. 4 out of those 8 people were parents. Now, one child out of those 8 people that were murdered by this guy, he, also ended up in the street. He had no father, and the mother was, the situation. And he ended up in the street. He ended up, getting involved in drugs, and he ended up dealing in drugs. From him, he was very successful in the drug business, especially since he was a little kid. He was able to give all his friends and that. He got 1,200 people hooked onto heroin. 90 out of those 1,200 people overdosed. By the way, that's a crazy amount. Now, let's take this, a step further. Now he becomes very successful. He builds up in the drug business. He becomes head of a cartel. By the way, I could keep on going until this starts World War III. I don't know if you see the action the way that I'm going here. Which means is that what? That one action, if God misses just one action, it could kill 80 kids. What did I say? 90, 80 kids? 90 kids it could kill. It could have 2 other people kill themselves. It could have, the effects are mind-boggling. The butterfly effect means that one effect is actually not affecting just one effect, it affects everything else. Meaning that God oversees every single thing that happens in your life. That is overseen by God and that is checked off by God. There's no such thing as God sees 99.999%. No. God oversees 100% of everything. Now what about your thoughts? If God is overseeing, we're speaking about actions. Now what about your thoughts? So, children, the way that a child's brain works is that, let's say they're playing hide and seek. If they're hiding and they can't see you, what do they think? You can't see them. Just like I can't see you, you can't see them. And we think, that's so childish. Of course that's so silly. Of course I'll be able to see you if there's a mirror, if I could see you from above, from the side, from the corner. There's so many different aspects of it. But are we any different? Can I read your mind, your thoughts? You say no. Can you read mine? No. Must be that nobody can read my thoughts. My thoughts are my own personal property. That's the way a person thinks. A person thinks that just like I can't see your thoughts, you can't see my thoughts, and nobody can see my thoughts. My thoughts are my own personal realm of safety, and I can do and I can think whatever I want. But God does hear your thoughts. God does see your thoughts. Now imagine for a second if you live with that. How different will your thoughts be? Therapists, people that have obsessive compulsive thoughts or anxiety related thoughts, one of the things that they say is like, listen, don't worry about it so much. Your thoughts are not going to hurt anybody. It's just thoughts. You have to just figure. They say whatever thoughts you are, don't feel ashamed of them. Don't feel bad at them. It's just thoughts. But is that really what the Torah says? Is it thoughts? Does it come into play in your if you're considered a good person, a bad person? Does God judge you on your thoughts? Imagine for a moment that the government came out with a machine. They take this satellite, they put it into space, and this satellite, if it beams onto somebody, it's able to read their thoughts. Everything. Not only read their thoughts, but visualize what they're thinking about. Everything. Why did the government create this? Obviously to stop terrorist activity. Right? Not for what the liberal, whatever, okay, I'm not going to get there. So obviously only to stop terrorist activity. But of course the freedom of speech, freedom of thought, you can think whatever you want. So the government, there was a law that was passed that, in this made up story, that if the government goes and wants to listen to your thoughts, they send you a letter. Say, hey, listen, you're on the radar for the Thought Machine 2000, and you are we're going to be listening to all your thoughts. What's your first thing you're going to write back? This is unfair. It's a violation of my privacy. Why am I supposed to do that? And what are they looking for? They're looking for terroristic thoughts. Now, what happens if I tell you that the government is listening to your thoughts, assuming you're not one of those people that wear, silver foil on your head, now, which already thinks that anyways. But I say, listen, hey, government is listening to your thoughts, and they're looking specifically for terrorist activities. What are you thinking about? Terrorist activity. You're like a Jewish girl that went to Beis Yaakov. Meanwhile, in your brain, you're blowing up the Statue of Liberty. I've never even went to the Statue of Liberty, and you're blowing it up, and you're you have only terroristic thoughts. And you're no matter whatever it is that you do, you're going and you have these terrorist thoughts. This is the concept when someone says don't think about something, that's the only thing that you're thinking about, right? Don't think about an Arab person throwing a ball of fire. What are you thinking about? An Arab person throwing a ball of fire. So, I don't know why that example came to my mind. But in any case, the first 2 weeks you're going to be upset. You're going to be are you kidding me? The government is listening to my thoughts? I can't control my thoughts. But guess what? If there's repercussions for your thoughts, and the government is listening to your thoughts, all of a sudden, after 2 weeks, you're going to realize you're going to figure out a way to control your thoughts. You're going to. If it's going to come with a penalty or sitting in prison, you're going to figure out some way to not think bad thoughts, not think terrorist activity. So what does the Torah say on this? There is a pasuk in Bamidbar, in Numbers, chapter 15, verse 39. It says, "V'lo taturu achar levavchem v'achar einechem." You should not go and you should not wander after your hearts and after your eyes. Asher atem zolim acharem, that you stray after them. You're not allowed to go and follow your eyes and your heart when they stray after it. Says the Sefer HaChinuch, by the way, this is one of the 613 mitzvot. This is mitzvah number 387. This is also, by the way, one of the 6 constant mitzvot as well. There's a Gemara in Bachot, page 12b, that explains this verse, this pasuk. Now, what does it say? It says like this. It says, you're not allowed to go acher levachem, after your hearts. What does that mean, acher levachem? It says the Gemara, zuminut. This is heresy, heretic thoughts. The Sefer HaChinuch goes and explains that a thought that causes a person to uproot something from the Torah, that's considered like something that's heresy. Then achrei einechem, after the eyes, this is immoral thoughts. Immoral thoughts that you're not allowed to have. And then asher atem zonim, this is referring to hirhu avodah zarah. This is talking about the straying, is referring to idolatry. So the Gemara says over here, there are three types of thoughts that a person's not allowed to have. Number one is heretic thoughts that are going against the Torah. Number two is immoral thoughts of immorality. And number three is idolatry. Those are the three thoughts that a person's not allowed to have. There's also,
like halachically?
Yeah. There's also there's an additional one. There's number 4, which is the 10th of the 10 commandments, is lo sachmod. Anybody know? No, I'm not going to ask. Lo sachmod is you're not allowed to covet. You're not allowed to go and want your neighbor's property, your neighbor's wife. You're not allowed to what? Jealousy. Yeah, but it's coveting. It's a little bit of a different angle of jealousy. Yeah, but it's exactly. So so we come up with 4 basic understanding of forbidden thought: immoral thoughts, heretic thoughts, idolatry thoughts, and coveting thoughts. So now there's a Gemara in Kiddushin, very interesting Gemara in Kiddushin, page 48. Can a person control their thoughts? Thoughts just pop into your head. Thoughts about, what is the... So the Gemara says like this. First of all, the Gemara doesn't speak about this, but there's two things we have to define. There's machshavot and there's hirurim. Machshavot is fleeting thoughts. Hirurim is when you're pondering about something, when you're thinking about something, when you're contemplating. Maybe a better, thing to explanation, terminology. So now, the Gemara in Kiddushin, page 40a, says like this: Machshava tova, if you have a good thought, God counts it as if you did it. Meaning that if you had a good thought to do something good, but you didn't do it, it counts as if you did it because you had the thought to do it. God combines it, you get reward for having good thoughts. But, says the Gemara, says that machshava ra, but a bad thought, God doesn't combine to action. God doesn't combine it, meaning you don't get punished for a bad thought. Says the Gemara, explains, but what does that mean? If you have an evil thought that does not lead into action, you don't get punished for it. But if you have an evil thought that leads to action, you get punished for the action and you get punished for the thought as well. So for example, somebody goes and decides that they're going to break Shabbat. This coming Shabbat, they're going to break Shabbat, they're going to go on a vacation, they're going to, whatever, they have a series of things they're going to do, they're going to break Shabbat. And they have it all planned out. But for whatever reason beyond their control, they couldn't go out and they kept Shabbat 100%. For that, they don't get punished for their thoughts. Their thoughts and their plans they're not getting punished for it. This is what the Gemara says. However, except for the things that we mentioned before. This is not referring to the things that we're talking about. Thoughts against minut, against heresy, thoughts that are immorality, and thoughts that are on avodah zarah and coveting. These do not fall into this category. But everything else, if you had a bad thought but it didn't fall into action, you don't get punished for it. Clear?
What about worrying?
Oh, we're going to get into that. Worrying is a lack of emunah and bitachon, but it's a long thing in itself. Yeah.
What if someone has a thought, let's say it's a heretic type of thought, but they go and they find out, they ask, so then they clarify.
Oh, okay, we're going to speak about that. Yeah, we're going to speak about that. So that what you're saying is very good, but let's go through it, and that should answer you. Rabelsky goes and says something like this. Says, if someone makes a vow, if someone vows something, when does that vow need to be upheld? Only if it's verbalized. But let's say if somebody vowed something in their mind, does that vow hold ground? Says Rabelsky, only in one aspect. Only in the aspect of tzedakah. Yeah. Oh, excellent. Only the aspect of tzedakah. If you make a vow in your mind that you're going to give a certain amount to charity, you have to keep to that. That is standard quote. But now, what does that mean? So let's say somebody goes and they knock on your door. And they say, hey, listen, they start telling you their life story. And, both their parents were abducted by astronauts who took them to the Mars. And, they have 400 children that they feed. The saddest story that you could think of. Everything of the saddest story. And they come and they give you a whole... And while they're saying the story, you're like crying. You have a tissue box. They're crying. Everybody's crying. And you're in your mind, you're like, I'm just emptying my bank account to this guy. This person needs so much money. And as they finish the story... And as in slow motion you're going into your pocket or pocketbook, whatever it is that you are going into, you're going to take out your wallet from, let's say you were originally going to give them $1,000, as your hand reaches down, it goes up to 500. As you get into your pocket, it gets to 250. By the time you take out your wallet, you give them a $5 bill. Now, are you held responsible? While that person was speaking, you were like, I want to give this person $1,000. Says Rav Belsky, when you have fleeting thoughts that are just popping into your head and they're popping in, you say, you know what, I have to give this amount to charity. But if it's a fleeting thought, then you're not held reliable. You're not held responsible. You have to uphold that. But if you make a conscious decision, you think about it. You say, you know what? No, I am. You're thinking about all the bad, and I say, you know what? I am giving this guy $50, and you're thinking about it, and you come to that. You should give those $50 because that you obligated yourself in that type of thought. So what we did was over here we separated. There's two types of thoughts. There are thoughts that are sort of like come into your head involuntary and they just leave the second that they come in, and there are thoughts that you're focusing on, that you're pondering about. Now, before we expand on this a little more, there's an Ezel Mikodesh that goes and explains like this. So you're not allowed to think about immoral thoughts, sexual thoughts, you're not allowed to think about that. But what about intellectually thinking about that? What about intellectually thinking about these type of thoughts? Says the Ezel Mikodesh, those you are allowed to do, because otherwise you wouldn't be allowed to learn any of the halachot that are related to that, to that concept. So intellectually speaking, you are allowed to, but fantasizing and lusting after that thought process, that you're not allowed to. So we have here some clarifications that we made over here. There's a difference between intellectually thinking about something, and by the way, this is referring to, the Ezel Mikodesh specifically brings it down on the sexual matters, not on the other three that we mentioned. So this is on the sexual matters. But there's also a thought that's a fleeting thought, and there's a thought that you're concentrating on, that you're focusing on about. So the Maimonides, the Rambam goes in the Moreh Nevuchim, in the Guide to the Perplexed, goes and says like this, that when a person sins, when the physical action, that's because his animalistic side of him is going and sinning. But what is the greatest asset of a human being? It's their mind. The mind is the greatest asset. And in fact, it's B'Tselem Elokim. It's in the form of God, a person's mind. The thought process is very spiritual. If you're going and you're sinning with the thought process, this is one of the worst things that you could do. And the Rambam says one of the most important things that you do is you purify your thought process, and you're connecting your character traits, and you're fixing and you're connecting to God in that manner. And in fact, Reb Chaim of Volozhin goes in Nefesh HaChaim and says that this is something crazy. He says thinking a sinful, immoral thought is a greater desecration than when evil Titus went and laid with a woman of ill repute in the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Whoever knows the story on the destruction of the second Bet HaMikdash. Now, why is it? Why is it having a bad thought worse than Titus going and being with a woman in the Kodesh HaKodeshim? So the Nefesh HaChaim goes and says like this. A person is like a Mishkan, and God dwells in the Mishkan. If a person is in the Mishkan, then the mind is the holy of the holiest. It's the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's the holiest part over here. Now, what's the difference between the body, the mind, and the Mishkan? The Mishkan is something physical. The body is also physical, but the mind is something that's spiritual. It's your neshama. It's something that goes up. So when you're desecrating your mind, you're desecrating something spiritual. That is something that is worse than desecrating something physical. And this brings us to another crazy point. The Maharsha goes and says like this. It's like Gemara in Makot, page 10b. It says, in the way that a man wants to go, the heaven will go and guide you to that path. Who leads him? Who's the one that leads him? Says the Maharsha something crazy. You know who leads him? The angels lead him. Which angels? Your angels that you made. Every thought that you have produces an angel. It's either a good angel or a bad angel. So when you're having a thought, and it's a good thought, so you're producing a good angel. When you're having a bad thought, it's producing a bad angel. The way, the thoughts that you have, the path that you want to go, the way that you want to go, that's who's going to lead you. Who's going to lead you? Your own creations are going to lead you. The angels that you made from your own thoughts, they're the ones that they're going to lead you. And this is based off of Pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 91, verse 11. It says, Ki malachav yitzav elach. Hashem will go and command His angels on your behalf leshmocha b'chol darachecha, to go and guard you in all your paths. Which angels? Your angels, the angels that you made. This is something crazy. The power of your thought has the power to guide you to the way that you want to go in your life. Now, what about? Let's take a pause on this for a second. Let's go focus a little bit on the scientific aspect of it. What is the scientific understanding of thoughts? So, Scientific American went and said that they published an interesting article. Part of the article states that the amount of thoughts that we have we're only aware of a tiny fraction of the thought that we have. Because most of our thoughts are what? Are subconscious, not consciously. Now, thoughts that we have subconsciously, these are not thoughts that we could actually, concentrate on, change on, unless you're really on like a high level of meditation. That we're not talking about in the spiritual realm, because that you have no control over. But the thoughts that you have control about, which means it's only a tiny part of your thoughts that you're responsible for. Have you ever, met somebody, or even better yet, you're driving, and it's quiet? I know women cannot take this, but let's say you're driving and there's people in the car and it's quiet. So a woman breaks the silence and says, "So what are you thinking about?" Men usually say one word, and that is, like, "What's on your mind? What are you thinking about right now?" Nothing. Like, you're not thinking about nothing. You think about like 7,000 things at one time. A woman, 7 billion things, right? But a man, like you said, you're not thinking about nothing. Rather, what you're saying is nothing important. I was just spacing out if I would be Superman. What I would do, I don't know. And a woman would be like, if I could clean my house so fast. Whatever. Obviously different priorities. But everybody has so many thoughts that are running through their mind. So why do we say nothing? We say nothing that is important. Let me take you a different path. Have you ever read a page? And let's call it davening. Maybe we won't call it davening. Whatever. You're reading a page and you realize, I have no idea what I just read. So you read davening again. You're not supposed to be doing this. Let's keep it with a book. Let's keep it kosher, and even though it's the opposite. But you're reading a book. You're studying for a test, even better yet. You read a page, and you get to the end of the page, and you be like, I have no clue what I just read. And you read the page again. And when you finish the page, you're like, did I read this? Where was I? Your mind is somewhere else. Your eyes is over here. Your mouth may be even mouthing those words, but your mind is somewhere else. You don't even know what your mind is going. Your mind is going on in a different path, and you can't even concentrate. You can't even focus. Have you ever been so exhausted? You're beyond tired. You've been falling asleep since 3 p.m. And you're falling asleep. Finally, you're like, okay, it's 8 o'clock. I'm going to hit an early night. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to get a solid 7-8 hours. It's going to be great. And you go and you lay down in your bed. And the second you think you're going to fall asleep, your mind is all of a sudden, it's like, hello, let's think about 14,000 things right now, shall we? And then they do the horror together. And your mind, are you kidding me right now? I've been falling asleep the whole day, and now I can't fall asleep because now you have to think about your death day. And then you're thinking about the taxes that's going to be next year. And maybe your job and a possible shidduch that you're not even up to yet. You're thinking about 17,000 things at one period of time. Now, science goes even further and says something like this. The impact of your thoughts is so fundamental that it depends if you're depressed, if you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're lonely, if you're disappointed, fearful, worried, sad, any other character trait, any other emotion that you have. Where does it all stem from? It all stems from your mind. Everything stems from your mind. And you have also a positive side as well. Have you ever walked in the street? And Makazdam over here. Okay, so have you ever walked in the... What?
I imagined it was a lot.
Yeah, it was. Have you ever walked in the street and you think about a funny joke that you heard in the shir, obviously, and then suddenly, right, exactly. But let's say you're sitting in the street or on a train, even worse, where you're in close proximity to a lot of people, and everybody's either looking at you or at you, and they're looking at you. And suddenly you're sitting over there and you're thinking about, the funny shir that you heard last night, and then you start and then everybody's like looking at you, and then they look at your ears to see maybe you have Bluetooth, and then they realize, no, you're just crazy. And you're thinking, what do you do? You have to start, it was a funny joke, listen to this joke, and you say whatever, you have to start explaining. You realize your thought has the ability that you're sitting on a crowded, smelly train, and you're able to go and bring yourself to laughter. You're able to bring yourself to laughter. That's the power of a thought. A thought has the ability to either make you depressed, make you sad, make you cry, or make you happy, or make you live life in a different way. If you ever hear about somebody tell you, hey, go to your happy place? And if somebody starts taking out a needle and, so then you're like, don't go that happy. Let's take it a step back. You go to your happy place. What does that mean? When you're going and when you're in a psychological and emotional different place, it changes in your physical being. Now, this is the power of a thought. The thought can change who you are. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Doesn't it pay to figure out how to control our thoughts? Doesn't it pay to figure out, if you control your thoughts, it's a key to life. If you control your thoughts, you control your life. If you control your thoughts, you control your emotions. So why hasn't anybody been doing this? Why hasn't, besides a few professors and the people that listen to those professors, nobody else, and people that keep the Torah, obviously, nobody else is focusing on this. Everything is based off your thought process. This is, by the way, why psychology comes in so important. Why therapy comes in so important. Because you say therapy, okay, so you pay somebody to go and listen to your problems. No. You're paying somebody to hear your solution to your problems. Now, it's the other way around, but they have to hear your problems to say it. But the concept is that they're teaching you how to think differently. They're teaching you the foundations of life. They're teaching the keys to life. So now, let's try to figure out how to control our thoughts. So let's see what the Torah says, and then we'll see what the sign says. The Torah goes like this. There's a Shem Yishmor in Shavuot, being that it's coming up to Shavuot. Quotes a midrash in Shemot Rabbah. It says when God gave the tablets, when God gave the Torah, it was 6 tefachim long. So a tefach is this big. So it was six of these long. So to speak, God was holding 2 tefachim. Moshe Rabbeinu was holding 2 tefachim, and 2 tefachim was in the middle. Now, what does this mean? Says the Shem Yishmor goes and explains like this. We can subdivide all the mitzvot to 3 categories: either actions, thoughts, or speech. Any mitzvah that you do, any good deed that you do, or any negative deed that you do, either falls to one or a combination of these actions. There's nothing that falls out of this category. Either you have action, speech, or thought. Right? Those are the 3 things that fall into play. Now, the Torah has a list of things. For example, thought. You have to believe in God. You have to go and say that there's no other force other than God. Also, you're not allowed to, we mentioned a few thoughts, right? You're not allowed to covet other people. Lo sachmod. You're not allowed to covet on anybody's other's property. That is on thought. Speech. You're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara, right? Other people think it's a mitzvah. You're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara. You have to verbally remember Shabbat. Yeah, we remember that Yetziat Mitzrayim. We have many things that we do verbally based off our speech, and many things that we're not allowed to do based off our speech. We have also actions. So give me a second. Give me a minute. Give me 5 minutes. Give me a little bit more. Okay, I'll figure out. I'll tell you when. Okay. Conversation in my mind. Okay. There's things under the actions. We go in a sukkah, we eat matzah, we shake a lulav, we go and we put on tefillin. There's things that we do based on action. We dress modestly. There's things that are based on our action. So we break it down to 3 things: action, thought, and speech. Now, thought is not entirely in a person's control. You can think about something, you can think about whatever you want, but you cannot prevent from something else, from another thought to come into your mind. Meaning, if I just say something, a yellow taxi cab from Manhattan on pink wings flying over here, you're going to probably think about something along those lines. Meaning, I could project things into your thought till you think it. You cannot prevent that from happening. You could go and conjure up your own thoughts, but you can't prevent other random thoughts from entering it. That's the thoughts. Thoughts, not really in your control. Partially in your control, because you could sort of think what you want, but you can't prevent things from falling into it. Now, action, on the other hand, is completely in your control. I cannot force you to do something. You're doing something based on your own free will. You're able to do whatever you want. You want to murder somebody? You want to give charity. I hope those are not your choices for the day, but you have the choice to do whatever it is that you want. Speech, on the other hand, has this in-between. It plays this in-between status between thought and between action. In Pasuk in Mishlei, chapter 16, verse 1, it says, "La'adam ma'achel lev." For the preparations of the man's heart, that's in the man. But ma'Hashem ma'anei lashon. But the answers of the tongue goes from what? Goes from God. Meaning that someone could prepare something and be like, you know what, I'm going to say this. You go over to your parents, your siblings, your spouse, whatever it is, and you'll be like, I have a whole speech prepared, and you're going to nail it, and you go up to and then you go over there, and then blah, blah, blah. You just fall flat on your face and everything, because you could prepare whatever you want to speak, but sometimes God decides what your tongue is going to say. Obviously, you're held responsible for it. Don't say, hey, listen, I was going to say something very differently. You have to deal with God. The fact that I just cursed you out, the fact that I just, that's between you and God, nothing to do with me. I'm just a messenger. Don't say that. You're responsible for your own actions. But speech has this in-between where you sort of have control like your actions, but at the same point in time, you don't have quite control just like your thoughts. So, the 2 psukim later, in Mishlei, chapter 16, verse 3, it says, you want to know how to control your speech? How to control your thoughts? Gal el Hashem ma'asecha. If you commit your actions, your ma'asim, to God, vayikunu machshavotecha, and your thoughts will be established. Says the Shem Yishmor like this: everything in life is dependent on action. If you go and you focus on your action, God will grant you power over your speech and even over your thoughts as well. Because everything is under action. When God goes and tells the Jewish people, hey, I have a Torah, you want to take it? What did they say? Not very good. Now, Sevishma, I spoke about this to one crowd and they had no idea what I said. I said, whoa, okay, we have to circle around this. Now, God goes to the Jewish people and says, hey, you want to take the Torah? You want to listen to Torah? What do they say? Na'aseh v'nishma. What does na'aseh mean? We will do and then we will listen. Why? Because they realize everything is all depending on action. It's not nishma, we'll hear, then we'll think, and then we'll do. No. First we'll do, and once we do, we will be able to hear, we'll be able to do everything else. Everything in life is based off action. This is why you have the story, the mitzvot that are related to Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus of Mitzrayim. You have to eat matzah, you eat maror, the drinking the wine, you relate the story. There's so many things that we're doing. We're cleaning the house for chametz. There's so many actions that we're doing. Why do we have to do so many actions? Let us just verbalize it. Let's just think about it. Thank you, God. Because everything in life depends on action. Everything is affected by action to the extent that if, let's say, a person is evil inside, like one of those evil people, you know, the people that give you tickets. I mean, it's just whatever. It's just like, God forbid. No, I'm nothing wrong against police. Just the police that stop me. But no, those evil people. You know, like somebody who's like, like, did you sell your soul to the devil? Like, what happened to you? You know, as a child. So. Those people, the worst of the worst, lowest of low, if they commit their actions and they follow the Torah the way that it's supposed to, shalom, not for the right sake, but they're doing the actions, says the Shem Shmuel, that eventually is going to turn their thoughts pure. It's going to eventually turn them pure. And the flip side as well. You have a righteous person, somebody who's very righteous, but they start doing evil deeds. They start doing one evil thing after another. Eventually that's going to corrupt their thoughts. It's going to corrupt their speech. Everything is going to be corrupted. Why? Because everything is depending on action. This is why the Rambam says that if you have an option to give a lot of money to one charity or small amounts of money to many charities, the Rambam says you give small amounts to many charities. Why? Because every action changes the way that you are, changes the way that you think, changes the way that you behave, changes the way that you feel. Rabbeinu Bachai also goes and says that when you do a mitzvah, you have the mitzvah that you did. You know, everything, whatever it is, the mitzvah, the spiritual benefit. But there's another benefit that happens to it. There's an inner cosmic benefit that happens to it. It changes who you are. You're dressing modestly, you're going and you're making a bracha. Yeah, you got the reward. You did something right, but that changed you as a person. This is why people that go and they follow the Torah, they become better people. Yeah, I've had many people that went and they spoke to me, and I spoke to spouses that became religious because their spouse became religious, not because they were following and they realized intellectually that there is a God. No, because they saw that their spouse was becoming better. You're learning anything, you're coming closer to God, that's going to change you. Whether you like it or not, it's going to change you. Your actions have a very, very strong effect on you. Now, if I would go and say, behind this wall, there's a depressed person sitting down. Now, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Is he sitting straight up or is he sitting slouched? Slouched. Okay, very good. Now, is he taking deep breaths or shallow breaths? Okay, is this person speaking fast or slow? Is this person when they're talking, are they talking loud or quiet? How do you guys know all this, by the way? You guys met up beforehand? How do you know about all this? You saw him walking in. Right? So, our physical actions depend on our emotions, and our emotions depend on our physical actions. They correlate. If I were to tell you somebody, based on their emotion, you're able to figure out how they're acting, how they're behaving, how they're breathing, how they're talking. Isn't that crazy that how much is dependent on your action, even something that has nothing to you would think has nothing to do with your action? There was recent research that was done. This was done by many universities. Harvard University, University of Oregon, University of Texas. They all fascinating research. They revealed that powerful and effective leaders have similar mindset and similar hormone levels. To what extent? That powerful leaders tend to have higher levels of testosterone. Testosterone, that means you have more dominance, you have more confidence, and lower level of cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. So if you have lower levels, you're less prone to anxiety, you're less prone to stress, you're able to handle stressful situations very calmly. Those are the character traits. They found out that the powerful leaders, the successful leaders, the people that were successful and running big corporations, running big organizations, they have high testosterone, men and women, high testosterone and low cortisol levels. that these type of people are more assertive, they're more confident, more relaxed, and more optimistic. This is a study that they made, that even they're more optimistic in a game of chance, meaning that it all depends on chance. It doesn't depend on your anything. But if you had a higher level of testosterone and lower level of cortisol, you believe that you will be more successful on a complete game of randomness compared to somebody else who had lower levels than you, or higher levels depending on the cortisol, testosterone. Isn't that isn't that crazy? And they did this study, and one of the physical cues, and they put it this way, that the testosterone and the cortisol levels, they change rapidly, and I'm quoting over here, depending on the social, physical, and environmental cues that surround you. And one of the physical cues that it depends on is your body language. Your body language depends a lot. Now, there was a study done by Harvard University, Amy Cuddy, if I'm pronouncing her name right. There are high-power body language and low-power body language. I have here some pictures, maybe I'll show you afterwards. I'm going to ask you, what would you think, high power or low power? Low. What about this? High. This? Low. How did you guys all? Did you guys read this study also? All of it, because you realize it's common sense, right? With the common sense, and there's something interesting that they did in this theory. People that have a higher body power body language, it changes their hormone levels. So if you have your body language changes in a certain way, it changes your hormone levels, which means it changes the way that you act. It changes the way that you think, and it changes the way that you feel based on your. Now I'm talking about specifically. I'm not saying what's correct thing to do. I'm not saying that you should go into meetings and go like this. Like 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just, there's a halachic aspect of tznius, and it says, well, but what did science come out? Science came out with one study after another study that your physical actions depend and they change your thought process. They change your emotion process. This is something that Torah has been saying for thousands of years. All of a sudden, recently, Harvard came into the play. They finally joined us. But before, the Torah was telling us this thousands of years ago. It all depends on action. It all depends on action. You do good, you'll become good. You do bad, you'll become bad. You'll think bad. Our emotions are influenced based on our non-verbal expressions, even more so our mitzvot that we do. Now, let's say somebody's depressed and they change their posture. They go from here and they lift up. And instead of, they take a deep breath and they speak a little faster. And let's say they smile. Try being depressed and smiling, even a fake smile. Like, oh, I'm so depressed. After a certain moment, you're either going to think silly or you're going to just, it changes who you are. And in fact, you could try this. In the train, if you like to think people are, you're crazy, but at home you can do this just as well. Smile for 2 minutes straight. Just like do the weirdest smile that you have, or, just like smile full on smile.
Did you try it?
Of course I've tried it. I've done it plenty of times, and I tell you it works.
On the train?
Well, on the train, not usually. Usually, in private. But I wouldn't say that I would care to do it on a train, that in my mind right now, there's a lot of things that could go wrong right now. 911 could be called, but when you smile, it changes who you are. You cannot smile and be upset. You could try it, but you're gonna have to work really hard. You have to work really hard. So this Harvard University professor, Dr. Amy Cuddy, goes and says, "Fake it until you make it." But then she says, "You know what? That's not a good thing." She says, "Better yet, you fake it until you become it." Now, I wonder if the Torah said something like, I don't know, maybe mitach shelo lishma balishma, or something along those lines. The Torah has been saying this whole time, that you do it even though you don't do it for the right reason, because guess what? Eventually, it's going to be for the right reason. Because eventually, it's going to change. Your actions change your thought process. So, we're under the impression that our minds change our body. But if you're smart, your body can change your mind as well. You have the ability to change your thought process. So number one, if you want to change your thought process, change your actions. Stop doing things that make you feel depressed. Stop doing things that make you feel whatever it is. You do good, and what's the number one thing to stop from all these depression, all these things? Do mitzvot. The more mitzvot that you're going to do, it's going to change you. It's going to change you spiritually, physically, emotionally, and intellectually. Everything is going to change because everything, bless you, is depending on action. When you change that, it's going to change who you are. The better that you do a mitzvah, the more that you do the mitzvot, the better off that you're going to be intellectually, emotionally, physically, and whatever else we messed up. Intellectually, whatever I messed up. Spiritually, thank you. That's number one. Number two, and the final point, we'll finish off soon. and then we'll get to your question. So,
It's fine.
did I answer it already? Okay, usually that's what happens. If I would tell you, don't think about a pink line. Like we said before, you're going to be thinking about a pink line. And now, if you have ADD, I lost you for the rest of the class because you're going to be like, wait, where's the pink line? What's the beard doing? You know, like what's this tail doing? Is everything pink? Is it darker pink? Is it redder pink? Yeah. What do you think I said? Elephant?
I heard a line.
Oh, lion. Okay. You think about a pink elephant. Let's use the common thing, that people use. A pink elephant. So, you cannot, how do you stop a thought from entering your mind? You cannot stop. Like now you're thinking about a pink elephant, a pink lion, or a pink lion, whatever you thought I said. So, the one way that you're able to go, you cannot say, no, I'm not thinking about this anymore. But your mind can focus on one thing at a time. Even though it's doing many things in the background, but it can focus on one thing at a time. So if you have a bad thought that enters your mind, put another thought, replace it. When you replace that bad thought, you can no longer think. So let's say you're depressed. Let's say you're upset. Let's say you're angry. Let's say you're angry for whatever reason. If you put in your mind a thought of gratitude, you can't be grateful and angry at the same time. Right? I mean, you'll be bipolar. But if you change your mindset, if you you replace the bad thought with a positive thought, you won't be able to go and hold the bad thought. Now, obviously, you have to, practice control over your mind. But this comes over time. You'll be able to go, and the more that you practice it, you have a bad, evil, whatever sinful thought that comes into your mind, even emotionally, a bad thought that comes into your mind, replace it with something positive. The more that you're focusing on that, the more that you're going to get out of it, the more that you're going to be able to control your thoughts. Now, the Tana Devei Eliyahu goes and quotes Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and says like this. I want to quote for you. Whoever puts the words of Torah on their heart, which means in their mind. Whoever puts the words of Torah in their mind are saved from thoughts of sin, from thoughts of fear, from thoughts of evil inclination, from idolatry, from being controlled by others, and obsessive thoughts. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying something very fundamental to science. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying the antidote to sinful thoughts, to bad thoughts, to harmful thoughts, is the Torah. When you have the Torah, when you're thinking about thoughts of the Torah, that's going to karate chop the bad thoughts out of your brain. The Gemara in Kedushin also brings this down, page 30. It says, Rabbi Shmuel says, if the evil inclination takes control over a person, the remedy is to pull him into the Bet Midrash, pull him to the house of study. The Kutzker Rebbe goes and says like this. He says that you're pulling him to the house of study, that's very nice, but don't think that that's going to solve all your problems. The evil inclination is going to be waiting for you in the classes as well. The evil inclination is going to say, hey, listen, you just got like 10 vibrations. You probably have to check that because you're the president of the world and people rely on you. And you have to check every side. You have those people, you text them, and the second they text you back, one of the things that I want to say is like, please get a life. Don't text me back so fast. What are you doing on your phone so much? You have people that are obsessed with it. But when you're going and when you're realizing that let's say you go to the Bet Midrash, says the Kutzker Rebbe, the evil inclination is coming in right there with you. The evil inclination is you're going to be in the class, but you have to save the world with your phone and Instagram and whatever things that is the important things that you need to do. You have to focus on it. So what's the whole benefit, says the Kutzker Rebbe, about if you have the evil thoughts, you go and you learn Torah. So the benefit that you have is that you have home court advantage. All of a sudden now you're in control. It's your turf. Okay, you want to go? Okay, fine. You're still going to have the evil inclination, but it's a path of going and fighting and trying to beat the evil inclination. So let's do a quick recap and then we'll open up for questions. So we started off with saying something like this. We started off with the 10th principle of faith. The 10th principle of faith is that God knows not only your actions, but also your thoughts, which is a scary thought, scary thought. God is a scary thought. God realizes everything. But what is it referring to? It's not referring to your fleeting thoughts. Your fleeting thoughts that you're not held responsible for. It's the thoughts that you go and you emphasize and it's the things that you go and you contemplate on, that you're going and you're focusing more on those thoughts. When you're focusing on those thoughts, you're held responsible. Now, why is this so important? Why is the fact that God knows everything that you do, everything that you think about? This is going to correlate to our next one that we're going to speak of B'ezrat Hashem next week, which is reward and punishment. This is going to correlate because now we can see that God is so in control of everything, knows that everything that's going on, that the reward and punishment is going to fit measure for everything that we do. It's going to be a crazy class next week. I recommend everybody to show up, especially me. It's going to be something that's very, very important to understand the aspect of measure for measure. Now, being that we spoke about thoughts, I utilize. By the way, you should know the fact that when I was preparing this series, so I finished this series a few months ago. I already prepared all the classes for it. When I was reviewing it this week to what I was going to speak about, this class was supposed to be 10 and 11. The principles were supposed to be together. This class was only supposed to be one page, and the rest was supposed to be on reward and punishment. But for whatever reason, that somebody had to hear this, somebody, I don't know if here or online or both, there's like, you know what, maybe I should put this in, maybe I should put this in. And I started, and this whole class built off something that wasn't even supposed to exist over here. So we say that God controls your actions and your thoughts. Also, the speakers that they speak of the Torah, they're preparing something. I wasn't prepared, to speak about this. But things went, and I was reading this, and I was learning this, and I said, you know what, maybe I can put this over here. Maybe this is important. And I came to the conclusion that this is very important. Now, in my mind, looking back, I'm like, how could I miss this? Imagine I would have missed this. This is so fundamental. Controlling your thoughts, fundamental to Judaism. How is it possible that I would have missed this? But it is. I would have missed it if, thank God that God put this into my mind, because I think this type of understanding, this type of thought process is so important. So many of us in nowadays and age are either depressed, sad, anxious. We have so many, issues that we're dealing with. How do we control that? We go through so many things. So Baruch Hashem, we gave two reasons to control it. Number one, focus on your actions. Do happy things, do good things, do mitzvot. That is going to change you. And number two, when you have a bad thought, don't dwell on it. Don't do that downward spiral thing. Don't, wallow in your own misery. Get out of that it's hard. It's not easy. Get out of that sick emotional zone, that sick intellectual zone, and replace it with something positive. Replace it. And you want to know what to replace it? The best thing that I was thinking about to replace it is gratitude. Hakarat tov. You're going and you're, let's say you had a hard life, you had a hard upbringing, and you're upset about jobs, family, whatever it is. Find some things that you're grateful for. When you find some things when you're grateful for, it's going to be hard to be sad. It's going to be hard to be depressed, the fact that you're alive, you're well, you're seeing, you're breathing, you're talking, you're able to eat. There's so many things to be grateful for. The more grateful that you are, the less that you're going to be able to wallow in your own misery. Any questions? Yeah.
So back to my question. So someone has a thought that's heretical, but they do something about it, like they go and they find out whatever. Are they? So they're
not held liable. So let's say somebody has a bad thought. Be like, you know what? Is the Torah real? Is the Torah fake? Let me look into it.
They go and they ask, or they
right.
look into it themselves.
So that's fine. That's not. They're not uprooting the Torah. They're trying to find the truth. This goes into play, especially for people that never heard about the Torah. They're called Bal Tshuva, or even people that were religious from birth, but no one ever told them about this. Be like, how do you know that the Torah is real? Go on Torah Anytime. There's a weird person by the name of Rabbi Zitron that goes and has 32 classes proving the Torah, and you tell them something along those lines. So, that's why when you're contemplating, when you're removing, that's why the Sefer HaChinuch goes, when you're taking things that you're removing away from the Torah, that's when you're held liable for those heretical thoughts.
If you're removing the thought, then it's fine.
If you're going and you're removing the thought, depending on how you're moving it, either intellectually or it's a fleeting thought, then you're not held liable, yeah.
But if it's a fleeting thought that keeps coming again.
So then look into it. So by looking into that, you're not lusting after, it's something that you're intellectually coming to a conclusion for it. But again, it really depends on the thought process that it is. Because I'm answering very broad, because there are some thoughts, there are some concepts that are beyond human understanding. Like, what was before God? That doesn't matter. Like, that's not, like because people come over to me with these types of questions. What was before God? If God created the world, then he was a creation, then maybe something had to create before him. And maybe so maybe there's a creator, maybe there's multiple gods. Now there's a very simple answer to that, and the answer is that you're thinking in the essence of time. Because the way that we work is that we work in time. So there's a creation followed by there's a creator, and there's the creation. And it goes in a process. So the inventor happened a while back, and now we have the invention. But when you take off time, then that changes the fact of was there anything before God, or there was nothing before God, because there was no time. Before is a concept of time. So there's many questions that it depends. Is there something that are answerable and something that are not meant to be asked because we cannot comprehend it? Not because there's no answers to it, because it's something we can't comprehend. We cannot comprehend things that are above and beyond time.
But if someone's just like the type of person that they just question a lot, so like if they had the thought, then they go and they get an answer, like they're fine.
Yeah, if they're going in and they have a thought and they're asking a rabbi, say, hey, listen, what does it mean with this? Then they're just uncovering intellectually the thought process, the philosophical thought process of the Torah. That is fine. But again, it really depends on the particular thought. That's a very broad answer. But once we get into the nitty-gritties of it, it might change depending on the thing that you. So for whoever has these constant thoughts, should speak to a rabbi, say, hey, listen, is this something that I'm allowed to think about? Is this something that I'm asking? Is it okay? Because it really is tailor fed. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do bad thoughts that go under, like, I guess the worst categories, or really any bad thought, do they come from like the other side of holiness, like the Sahara, and you're just like, hi, it's Sahara. I know that you're trying to like mess with me, and you're just like, hey, go away, bye.
Yeah, so your question is like this: do bad thoughts come from the evil inclination? So yes and no. Yes, that it does come because of the evil inclination, but at the same point in time, we also invite those bad thoughts.
Okay.
But subconsciously or consciously, we invite it. So especially, for example, people that have depression, let's say, or maybe anxiety would be a better diagnosis to go discuss. So they have a basic anxiety status. Now, let's say they can't go into an elevator, right? They're nervous that it's going to fall, whatever it is. So they go, or an escalator, whatever it is. So they have this anxiety related to it. So they have the basic thing. But what happens is when they get in their own mind, they make it a lot worse than what it actually really is. So they take something that maybe the Yetzer Hara just like, hey, like, think about someone murdering you, and you, even better yet, think about a spider crawling in your nostril when you're sleeping. Okay, and I'm sorry. Okay, I know. I didn't realize that. And then anxiety is like, 3 steps ahead of that person because it's their own thought process because they're not correcting it. And within a few seconds, they don't have a spider in their nose. They have a family of spiders sitting in their belly. Like they're taking it to the next level. So while the evil inclination said hey, psst, spider, nose, and then it's out of there. And you take that and you run with it. So there is both why am I saying it in that manner? Because any action that you do, any thought process that you do, it could stem from the evil inclination, but what you do with that initial thought depends on where you go. So let's say if somebody there's an immoral thought that comes into a person's head. That could be based off of the evil inclination. But if you go and you contemplate it and you go with it and you fly with it, then you're held responsible. But if you say no, and you're able to replace that thought with a good thought, then you're not held reliable. So it goes both. Your answer to your question is really both.
Does anyone talk about it, does any rabbinic literature talk about it in terms of literally talking, because if it's the Yetzer Hara, then it's an energy that's not actually yourself. And it's easier to fight against something outside of yourself than yourself. So if you're just
that is why that if you so the evil inclination has certain criteria that he's able to work with. So if you're let's say this righteous rabbi that's never been secluded, he's not going to be hey, go on the internet and be what's the internet? You're not going to introduce you things that are not. It's based off so it really goes both because it's based off your personal upbringing, personal experiences, and then temptation that comes into it. So yes, it's a third party. Yes, it's something that's out there. And yes, you could deal with it in that manner, but it's also dealing with yourself. Okay. Because unfortunately, in nowadays and age, we tend to push blame on others. And it's easier that way. It's it's my parents' fault that I became this way. It's my teacher's fault that I became this way. And it's easier. And again, I'm not judging anybody. Everybody has their own upbringing, their own situation. And really, people have a hard time, and it does come into play. But ultimately speaking, the more that you push your blame on others, the less that you're going to fix yourself. When you fix yourself, that's when you're able to go and to be able to move on in life. And I'll give you an example. So I gave, a few weeks ago, there's somebody came here and I did a few short-minute clips. And I forgot, what was it? Meaningful. So one of the meaningful moments, whatever it is. Yeah. So I gave a short clip over there on a fact that's saying that the title was "You Are the Problem." That many people go to therapists and they say this therapist not good, this therapist not good, this therapist not good, this therapist, everybody's not good. And I say, listen, when that happens, that doesn't mean that the therapist's not good. Maybe, just maybe, you're the problem and not the therapist. So people like to tend, and I got such heat from this 1 minute class. Oh my God, you don't even know what I was dealing with this, with this 1 minute class. How could you say that? How do you, So it's the same concept, and I still hold strong by why I say it. We tend to push blame on others. Now, I'm not saying, I'm not putting people down that people went through hard upbringings. People went through hard upbringings, and you know what? It's sad, and yes, God takes that into account. But you're not going to change yourself by changing the past. The past happened already. The only way to change right now is by changing you. And by saying you are the problem, it's uncomfortable. No one likes to hear that. No one likes to hear that I'm the problem. People like to hear, my parents are the problem, my spouse is the problem, this is the problem, my teacher is the problem, somebody else is the problem, not by me. But the more that you do that, you will never change. When you change, and this is why AA has the same thing. The first thing that you say is, I have a problem. If you want to go, if you have so many questions on God, I have people that ask me constantly questions on God. Like questions like, how does this work? And they're constantly asking questions on the Torah. Now, is it really that they're intellectually looking for these, for the answers? Or they're looking for the questions? Or they're constantly looking for the questions. So they're saying the Torah is faulty. Is it faulty, really? Or maybe your mindset is faulty. Like, why are you looking for holes when you have been proven time and time again that it's true? So people like to put the fault at something else and blame it something else rather than upon themselves. Now, as difficult and hard as it was, I still stand very strongly by what I said. That and this goes even to my own personal life, my family's own personal life, everybody's own personal life. If there's something going on that's wrong, think about you. What can you change for a moment? Because guess what? The easiest thing to change is yourself, even though it's the hardest thing at the same point in time. Because you're not going to change your family. You're not going to change your situation. The easiest thing to do is change yourself, even though it's the hardest thing to do at the same point in time. So when the quicker that you are to admit that you need to change, the quicker you are to the path of change. So if somebody has these depressing thoughts and they think okay, it's never going to happen. It's never going to. Guess what? You're never going to change it. But if you get out of this class today and say, you know what? That's it. I'm going to work on not having any more negative thoughts. Forget about spirituality. I'm talking about emotional well-being. I'm not going to have any more depressive thoughts. The second the depressive thoughts are going to come into my mind, I'm going to think about gratitude. Something I'm going to be grateful for. That's going to change your life. But if you say, why do I have to be grateful for? It's not my fault. It's this person's fault. It's God's fault. Oh, everything is God's fault. All of a sudden they believe in God, right? Everything is all God's fault. Stop for a second. It changes your whole mindset. It's a wake-up call. It really is. It's difficult to think about that you're responsible for your own actions. Something that we don't understand as Americans, but it is. And the more that you come into that, as hard as it is, the greater that you are to a path of success. The greater that you are to a path of happiness as well. Question, right? Wait. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so basically talking to your Zahar is a quick fix that you should do Teshuvah and officially understand.
Right. I know you asked me a question and I was like on a 4-hour lecture, but yeah, okay, fine. Okay, yeah. So sorry.
I don't understand the whole, if you think Torah thoughts, all bad thoughts disappear. Like, I don't understand.
It's not that all bad thoughts, this is what the Kutzker Rebbe goes and explains, it's not that all bad thoughts are going to disappear. Think about it like this. Let's use Army, for example. There are a bunch of people that came into this room not this room, a different room that you're having, that not you, but somebody's, whatever, you get what I'm saying, right? A bunch of people came into a room with swords. Swords. Yeah, olden day, right? Swords. Pushing, like one of those, swords, and be like, and they do one of those things. And they come into the swords. And these people, these beings are bad thoughts. Now, you have ways of either running out of the room, hand-to-hand combat, whatever it is that you want. Think of the Torah with a machine gun. So you're like a machine gun against those bad thoughts. So the bad thoughts come in, and you're going to take out this thing and be like, what you got? And then you're like, and you just like take them all out in the most loving way possible, those bad thoughts. Now, is it going to prevent? No, you could miss some of those people, right? They could be ninjas, practice in Japan, and they could do 3 somersaults in front of it, whatever it is, but it's the most powerful way to get rid of it.
What's considered Torah thoughts? Like, what do you think?
Emunah, bitachon. If you want to really have, then yeah, like anything Torah, like even Chumash, yeah. Think about a story about Avraham Avinu. I don't know, whatever. You think about something Torah related is already a Torah thought, and that already combats it. If you're a man, I would say think about Gemara, because the way that it works is like this, and this maybe will answer your question. The deeper and the more difficult the concept that you're thinking about, the better that you have at evacuating those bad thoughts. Meaning that let's say you're listening to a class. So let's say the class is a very light class. It's stories, it's funny, it's this. So it's very easy to listen to. And you could listen to it, but your mind could also wander at the same point in time, and you could still listen to it. But let's say you need to focus on a really difficult class. Like there's so many things that are going back and forth, and you're writing notes, and you're going back, and you're asking questions, and there's so many things. Where is it less likely that your mind will wander? The more difficult one. So the more difficult concept that you understand in Torah, the more that you're focusing your mind on something else, the more that your mind blocks off anything else. That makes sense? So that's why I would say, let's say for men, it's Gemara. They're learning Gemara all the time, they focus on that. For women, whatever it is that you were learning, whatever it is that you can't, or maybe you learned on yourself, the deeper and more intellectually stimulating that it is, the better of a power that it has against removing those thoughts. Okay? Question? No. Question.
Can a reward and a punishment for a thought contradict itself in a way, like could it negate itself? Like say you have a good thought for the same mitzvah, but then you have bad thoughts coming in for that. So can you be punished and rewarded? You say you get rewarded for a good thing, but if it's the same thing that you're thinking of, just on different sides of the thing. That's an interesting question. That's also a difficult question. So we have to break it down actually. So let's say you did a good deed and you have a bad thought not to do the good deed or whatever it is, but you did the good deed, so you don't get punished on that thought because you didn't follow through with that action. Because it's only if you follow through on the thought of the action do you get punished for the thought as well. But let's say you had a good deed that you wanted to do, or a neutral deed that could go either good or bad, and you decided to you had bad thoughts, and then you went and you did the bad thing, then you get punished for the bad thing as well. So when your thinking doesn't negate one another, it all depends on the outcome. Unless it's those things that we mentioned, those four things that we mentioned, on the heresy, the immorality, the idolatry, or the coveting. That all depends on. But otherwise, it depends on your outcome. But if you have a bad thought and then you quickly replace it with a good thought, that bad thought is null and void. There's nothing to it. Any other questions? Any other questions on camera? Okay, Chazak u'Baruch. Thank you all.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.